It's a wondrous phenomenon that most people have never seen in person. Yet its beauty evokes a sense of grandeur. While only a fraction of its majesty is visible to the world, the deeper you explore its depths, the more you discover that its size and power are so much more vast than you ever could have imagined. When it comes to the unrealized wonders of the world, God's gracious kindness is truly breathtaking.
Well, hello and good morning once again. Welcome to Pathfinder, into our series, Flipping the Iceberg, where we are going beneath the surface and we're seeing the enormity of God's kindness to us. It's so much greater than we can even imagine, so much greater than we think. Now, I'd venture to say that most of us have heard the story of the Ugly Duckling, right? You've kind of heard the story before. If you've definitely heard it, I'm sure, at some point in your life. The plot, I think we pretty much know. The plot goes like this. There is a duckling that is hatched along with his siblings, but immediately realizes that he does not look like all the other ducklings. The other ducklings don't treat him very well. He finds himself alienated, ostracized, not belonging to the group. And if you've read the full fable, the full story of the Ugly Duckling, you know that it gets pretty grueling, because not only does the duckling not find belonging with its family, but it goes around trying to find belonging with the other animals, with other people. There's even a part of the full story that says the duckling spends a winter alone in a cave and nearly freezes to death. And at the end of that winter, the duckling is so just tired of being alone, so desperate for connection and belonging, that he leaves the cave and he sees this flock of birds, the most beautiful birds he's ever seen, out on the pond. And he decides that he's gonna go and he's gonna throw himself on their mercy and beg them to let him belong with them, even though he's so ugly, and decides that even if these birds decide to peck him to death, it would be better to be pecked to death by such beautiful birds than to spend one more moment alone. But you probably know how the story goes, right? Goes out onto the water after leaving that cave and sees these beautiful birds and catches a glimpse of himself in the reflection of the water and realizes that he is one of them. He has been a beautiful swan the whole time. Now, it's a powerful story about the deep need we all have, the longing we all carry within us for belonging. It's also a story that reminds us that so often in our lives, the path to belonging is first filled with a lot of alienation, a lot of suffering along the way. But I've been thinking about how this story might play out differently in modern times if it were written today. You know, who knows how it could be different? I mean, maybe the duck could have gone and spent all of his money at a really nice duck boutique, the duckling, buying all the best clothes and accessories to get that perfect duck look and pass himself off. Or maybe he could have found a YouTuber. I'm sure there's one out there, a YouTuber who could have told him how he could transform his appearance in 30 days, get that perfect duck body, right? Or there's always surgery, right? Get his neck shortened, his eyes lifted, his beak changed, his feathers dyed. Or maybe the duck would just decide to live his life in the online world and hide behind an avatar. No one would ever be the wiser, right? Be a different story today, and for a lot of us, we live those stories. How many of us would trade beauty, true beauty, for belonging? How many of us would change anything or everything about ourselves in order simply to fit in? How many of us already have done all that? And you know, it's understandable, because one of our deepest human needs is the need to belong. In sociology, it's called man's gregarious nature, this need we have to belong, to gather, to be with other people. We've experienced that over the last year, where it's not safe to be with others, but we long to do it. In sociology, we talk about how very early on a child needs belonging in order to develop right. If you don't have belonging, you'll never develop in the right way. God in the very beginning says, "It is not good for man to be alone." I feel like I've repeated that dozens, hundreds of times over the last year. Now, here's the thing. Throughout time, for most of us, for most people throughout time, belonging was something that was just given from the very beginning. Things determined your belonging without even thinking about it. Your ethnicity, or maybe your specific faith persuasion, or maybe it was your family name, or maybe it was your geographical region. Those things gave you a sense of belonging, right? If you were Italian, you belong with the Italians. If you were Irish, you belong with the Irish. Germans with Germans. Your faith, your denominational label would give you the same. Your family name, all that stuff mattered. And our world is now reeling from a loss of all of these things. Because I don't know about you, but when I look at my Ancestry DNA report, I am a mutt. It's hard to say what ethnic group I belong to. And most of us, we don't really hold on to a denominational or faith label in the same way that we used to anymore. And for a lot of us, our family name doesn't mean much because we live hundreds of miles away from where our family hailed from. We move all over the place. We don't have geographical connections anymore. And so now you know what's taken the place of all of those things? In our society today, do you know the thing that gives us belonging more than anything else? Maybe rivaling the stuff that we buy, the brands that we wear. It's our politics. You know that, right? And you can see this over the last year. For most Americans right now, the thing we look to give us a sense of identity and belonging is the party that we align with. But here's the thing. Belonging, and this is so good and this is so important, belonging works different in the family of God. And that's what we're gonna see today from some pretty ancient biblical history. In this series, Flipping the Iceberg, we've been moving back in time to see that God's grace is not just a New Testament innovation. Sometimes we think of it that way. We think, Jesus comes and suddenly there's this grace stuff. But the reality is, grace has existed as the heart of God from the very beginning. It is the foundation of his being and the foundation of his relationship with us. And we're gonna see this today in Joshua chapter 2. This is way early in the Bible. This is 1,400 years before Jesus. 1,400 years before Jesus. And what's happening right now is God's people, they've been rescued from slavery in Egypt. They're really becoming a people, they're becoming a nation. And they're about to go into the land, the promised land that God was gonna give to them. They're about to claim it for themselves. But in the middle of all that, we're gonna see a powerful story about the grace of belonging. Joshua chapter 2, let's look at it. Then Joshua, son of Nun, he's now the leader. So Moses hands the mantle to Joshua. Joshua is the leader of the Israelites as they move into the promised land. Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim on the outskirts of the promised land, said, go look over the land, especially Jericho. Now, maybe you've heard of Jericho before. This great walled city stood right on the outskirts of the promised land, stood in the way of the Israelites being able to come in and take the land. So Joshua sends out spies. We want to see the lay of the land literally, but check out Jericho especially. So they went and they entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab, and they stayed there. Now, Rahab's gonna be important later. Notice her profession. This also prompts the question for me, what are these 2 nice Hebrew boys doing in a place like this? And maybe it is that a house of a prostitute is the one place anyone can find belonging. These foreigners not trusted in Jericho, maybe in the house of the prostitute, that's the only place they could find acceptance. Or maybe this is a matter of what's been true of soldiers who find themselves in foreign lands over time. Maybe they're there for another reason. We can't say for sure what's going on with these guys or what their character is. But here's what I'll tell you, that this name, Rahab, and her profession, prostitute, it far diminishes who this woman will prove herself to be. She's pretty incredible. Let's read on. It says, then the king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab, bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and she had hidden them. And she said, oh yeah, the men came to me, but I didn't know where they had come from. And at dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. And I don't know which way they went, but you know what? I bet if you go after them really quickly, you may even catch up with them. But the reality was she had taken them up on the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit, the soldiers of Jericho set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. So at this point, we don't know a lot about Rahab. We know she's a prostitute. She adds to her resume here, she's also a pretty good liar. Right? She lies to her king. She betrays her people. What's that about? Well, maybe she's resentful. I mean, talk about the ugly duckling. She's lived as an outcast from her people all this time, living as a prostitute here in her city on the very outskirts, we'll see in a second, on the very outskirts of the city. Maybe she's tired of being an outcast, being alienated from her people. Maybe she's jaded and she wants to get even. Sort of like Stephen King's Carrie. You know that story? Woo. School dance. Maybe this is her moment to get even on all of these people who have been so unkind to her. Maybe that's why she lies. Maybe that's why she betrays her people. But I'll tell you, there's actually a better reason. We'll see it right here. This is why she misled her own king. Before the spies lay down for the night, Rahab went up to the roof where she was hiding them. And she said to them, I know. See, here's what I've come to know. This is so important. I know that the Lord has given you this land and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came up out of Egypt. And we heard about what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites, on the outskirts of our land, east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God, listen to this, for the Lord your God is God of heaven, is God in heaven above and on the earth below. See, what's Rahab's reason for lying to her king, betraying her people? It's that she has heard the reports of the Israelites. More important, she has heard the reports of who their God is, and she has come to the conclusion she now knows that the Lord, their God, is not just their God, he is the God of heaven and the God of earth, the God who is over everything. It's a powerful conclusion, right? But she sees it happening and there's no other conclusion for her, but that's not the only thing she comes to know. It's not just that God is powerful. Here's what else she knows as it goes on. Now then, she says, please swear to me by the Lord, swear to me by the name of your God that you will show kindness to my family because I have shown kindness to you. And give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. What else does Rahab notice about God and his people? Not just that they're powerful, not just that they're ruthless in battle, not just that God is mowing over people, but she believes at the heart of God there is kindness. See, she believes at the heart of God and his people is a God who is kind enough to spare them from death, to spare people from death. This just blows me away. This immoral woman from a foreign pagan town sees past the power and the ruthlessness of God. She sees right down into his heart. She sees his kindness even to a woman like her. And so she makes this request, this bold request. You guys don't appear to be kind, but I know better. I'm asking you to be kind to me. Look at how the spies respond to her. They say, hey, our lives for your lives, they assured her. If you don't tell what we are doing, we promise we'll treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. And you see, they make this promise in Joshua chapter 2, and then a few chapters later in Joshua chapter 6, they keep the promise. Time comes for them to go to Jericho to destroy the city, and if you know the story, they march around the wall how many times? Anybody know? 7 times. They march around the wall. The 7th time, they blow the trumpets, and the walls fall down. But before they go in and they totally just destroy the city, It says, but Joshua, the leader, remember him, he's in charge. Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute with her family and all who belonged to her. Because she hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. To the time of the writing of the book of Joshua, Rahab and her family were still there. Get this. Not only did the Israelites, the soldiers, not only did they give her rescue, they spared her life, but notice what else they gave her. They gave her belonging. She lived among them to that very day. Now, on its own, you know what, this would be a great story about the compassion of God's people. This would be a great example of what it looks like to be an inclusive community, but it gets even better. See, if you fast forward now 1,400 years to the time of Jesus, here's what you see at the beginning of Matthew's gospel. You see that Matthew begins with a genealogy, the story of Jesus' own lineage. And I'm not gonna go through all of it, but here's what I want you to see. Matthew says, Matthew 1, verse 1, the very beginning of the book, this is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And then he's gonna connect the dots from Abraham. So he says, Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob. And then he goes on with all these names. We're gonna skip over the names, but I want you to see this. Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Bless you. I'm an allergy sufferer too, I get it. We're simpatico. Look at this. Whose mother was Rahab. See, it was the Israelites' decision to rescue Rahab, right? That was their choice. The Israelites decided to rescue her, to give her belonging in their people. That was their decision. That was their kindness. That was not the kindness of God. Israel's decision was to take Rahab in. It was God's decision to make this foreign pagan prostitute. It was God's decision to take her and make her part of the sacred bloodline of Jesus. There are 4 women mentioned in this entire genealogy of Jesus. One of them is Mary, his mother. 3 other women beside that. And Rahab gets named by name. See, don't miss this. God took this sinful woman, this foreigner, this outsider, and he not only brought her in, but he made her royal. Gosh, and I want you to know he's done the same thing for us. We were once outsiders. None of us, or very few of us, I would probably say, belong to this family or have this name or are from this geography. And yet here we are, not only brought into the family of God, but we are royal sons and daughters of his. See, belonging works differently in the family of God. It's not based on our ethnicity or our family name or our geography. I think we know that. But here's something else. Belonging in the family of God is also not based on our ability to follow the rules. And I don't think we know that. Because here's what happens in most groups. Most groups operate this way. You're given belonging by virtue of your bloodline or your ethnicity or whatever other label that you have. You get belonging through something, but the way belonging is kept in most groups is through following the rules. Whatever the rules are of the group, belonging is kept by being willing to abide by the rules. And so when someone refuses or is not able to follow the rules, here's what happens in groups. One of 2 things. Either the group will expel the rule breaker, or the group will relax the rules, the standards of the rules, so that anyone can belong. Right? 2 things that happen. And we see this play out, especially in the history of religious movements, religious denominations. You've seen this played out. There are the fundamentalists who say, no, the rules are the rules, and anyone who can't fit the rules or abide by the rules, you're out. You're excommunicated, you're banished, you gotta wear a scarlet letter, whatever it is. We know those movements. And then on the other side, we know the movements who are like, we just want you to belong, and they diminish the rules over and over again until at the end there are no rules. There is no standard. But here's what I want us to know, that God's family does not work in either way. See, in God's family, belonging isn't based on the rules at all. In God's family, belonging is based on one thing and one thing only. It's based on Christ. Paul says it this way in the New Testament. He says, you know what, now in this community, there is neither Jew nor Greek, or Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free. There is no male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Look at this again. There is neither Jew nor Gentile. Those are ethnicities. I mean, religious movements and ethnicities. Paul says, nope, not anymore. There's neither slave nor free. There's no socioeconomic status in this community, Paul says. There is no male and female. There is no biology. There is no biological sex, because the reality is, if you are in Christ Jesus, that's all that matters. See, in this family, in the family of God, belonging is not found based on how you look. It's not based on your ethnicity. It's not based on your pedigree. And it's not based on your ability to follow the rules. See, God has always been about composing an insanely, impossibly diverse community that he would call his family. You see this in the ministry of Jesus, by the way. Jesus, he goes and he invites all kinds of people to follow him, but he picks 12 people to be his inner ring. We call them the disciples. And you know, one of those 12 that Jesus picked was a guy, his name was Simon the Zealot. He's called Simon the Zealot. I don't know if you know what a zealot was back in those days, but the zealots were people who wanted to, they advocated for the radical overthrow of the government. They were revolutionaries, they were insurrectionists. They hated that the government was so corrupt, it was immoral, and they wanted to overthrow the government by force and establish a purer government. Jesus invited Simon the Zealot, this fringe revolutionary, to be a part of his inner circle of 12. But then you know what else Jesus did? Jesus went over and invited this other guy, a guy by the name of Levi. We know him by the name of Matthew. We just looked at his gospel a moment ago. And do you know what Matthew did? He was not a zealot. He was a tax collector. See, Matthew not only did not want to see the government overthrown, but he profited from the corrupt government. He was a tax collector. He was in bed with the government. It made him rich. And Jesus calls Matthew, the tax collector, who loves the government and is exploiting the corrupt government to his own advantage, and Simon the Zealot, who hates the government and is ready to overthrow it at any moment. He invited those two guys to be a part of his inner circle. And as the mission of Jesus unfolds, we see that he's set on this, creating an impossibly, insanely diverse community. And so he incorporates all the people that Paul just talked about, Jew and Greek and slave and free and male and female. And he says you can all belong, because the only criteria for belonging now in the family of God is Christ. The only thing that matters is him, our faith and our trust in him. See, Rahab saw to the heart of God, his kindness, his inclusiveness, when all she could see, the only testimony she had, was watching God be this great destroyer of foreign armies and cities. How much better is our testimony? Because we don't see God just as some great destroyer. We have seen him as the great Savior. We've seen him come in the flesh, and we've watched Jesus give up his life for us on the cross to rescue us from every life-stealing thing that assaults us. See, how much greater is our testimony to this God who says, you know what, you're belonging with me. It's not a function of what you do or who you are. It's simply a function of what I've done for you and your trust in me. See, that's what makes our family so different. Now, I want to be clear about one other thing. I want to be clear about this, that God has perfect ideals. And I call them ideals here because I think this gets to the heart of it. We talk about rules or standards, and rules and standards can be arbitrary, right? People can just want to control you, and so they create dumb rules that don't mean anything. God doesn't create any dumb rules that don't mean anything. His rules or standards are actually, they're ideals. And God's ideals are perfect. God is showing us the way for us to find life and wholeness in every part of our lives. That's what his ideals are about. And if we listen to that, we will find wholeness, we will find fullness in our lives, in our families, in society, and in the world. God has perfect ideals, and you know what else is true? That no matter how bad we are at living up to God's ideals, he doesn't dumb them down. He's not a God who grades on a curve and says, okay, everyone gets an A, everyone gets a trophy, I don't want to hurt your feelings. He holds his ideals where his ideals are, because the ideals are the way that we will find wholeness in this life. It's the way we'll live life to the full in the here and now. So God would never dumb down his ideals. His ideals are perfect, and he upholds them perfectly. But you also need to know this, that God accepts people who can't attain to his ideals. He does not diminish his ideals ever, but he is glad to accept people who cannot live up to his standards, cannot follow the rules, cannot attain to his ideals, which is why we have Rahab today. It's why we have her story. And notice this. This is not some skeleton in Jesus' closet that the tabloid magazines dig up in order to discredit him. Right? But this is someone that God, inspiring Matthew, this is someone that God brings into broad daylight. One of 4 women named in the entire genealogy when women weren't normally named in genealogies. See, that's why she gets mentioned by name, to show us that God has perfect ideals, yes, but he gladly accepts people who cannot attain to his ideals. Now be clear about something. Prostitution, that's not God's plan for anybody. And because God accepted Rahab, that was not God saying, hey guys, I endorse prostitution now. Prostitution isn't good for anybody involved, but I also don't want you to think for a minute that someone who is a sex worker or someone who visits sex workers is now disqualified from belonging in the family of God, because that's not how belonging works here. Now, I think we have to reckon with this as the Christian church of today, because we don't hold this tension very well. We would lose our minds. In fact, we would lose our minds if God did something in our midst like he did back then. In fact, I'm pretty convinced that all of the people in the Old Testament, even the ones that we call heroes of the faith, that we, knowing what we know about them, we wouldn't allow any of them to be in leadership in one of our churches today, because we don't hold this tension well. If you don't believe me, think about this. Abraham, he was a bigamist. He had children from multiple women. Judah, the father of the tribe that Jesus would eventually descend from, he was a guy who visited prostitutes. One of them happened to be his daughter-in-law, who was in disguise. She had to trick him because he refused to take care of her after her husband died, even though the law said so. It's a pretty dark story. Moses, he committed murder. Samson, the big, powerful Samson, delivered the Israelites from the Philistines. He was a drunk and a womanizer. He loved to tell dirty jokes. Actually, some of those jokes are recorded in the book of Judges. You can read them for yourself. King David, he had way too many wives, and yet that was not enough for him, because then he saw another woman that was not his wife. She was married. He took her to be his own wife, got her pregnant, killed her husband, had her husband murdered. I could go on. And just so you women aren't feeling left out, the women in the Old Testament, they were a little bit better morally, or at least their sins were a little more nuanced, and I think that's still how it is today. But they still did not live up to our standards. Sarah, Abraham's wife, she claimed to be a sister so that she could live in the harem of a foreign king for a while. As you already know, Rahab was a prostitute. Ruth, if you know her name, she used some questionable tactics to get Boaz to marry her. Esther, she used more than her beauty to become the queen of Persia. And if you don't know those names, you can just take it on my promise to you. You can read it for yourself. I'm telling you, it's true that if you look through the Old Testament, we would not find a single person, a single leader, a single hero who would be able to meet our standards. We wouldn't know what to do with these people. In fact, we would erase them from our history if we could. We would whitewash over their names. We would die from scandal at any of these people being a part of our community today. But we need to reckon with that. Because while we are called, just like God does, to uphold his ideals for life and morality, we can affirm his standards as the way to life. But here's the problem. If we make playing by the rules, upholding the standards, living up to the ideals, if we make that the criteria for belonging, then we are out of step with God. You hear me? And here's why this is great news. You may find this alarming, but here's why this is great news. Because for you, it is only a matter of time. And I have been at this long enough to say this with 100% certainty. It is only a matter of time before you find yourself in the position of someone like Rahab. It is only a matter of time when you, even if you're someone who is a passionate defender of the rules, it is only a matter of time before you find yourself in violation of those rules, because the scriptures say no one is righteous. And all sin and fall short of the glory of God. And if we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. And see, here's what you can count on. When that happens, and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. When that happens, here's what I can tell you. Here's what I can promise you. As long as I'm here at Pathfinder, that we as a body, we will not erase the standard. We will not diminish the ideal. We will never stop pointing toward the ideals of God for us, because those are his ways that lead to life and wholeness. But at the same time, we will not kick you out. We will not kick you to the curb. Instead, we will point you back to Jesus as the one who has paid for all of your sin, the one who, in opening his arms wide on the cross, was inviting you to come and to find belonging. See, the great news for us is that your level of perfection, your level of righteousness, your level of adherence to the rules, it does not determine your level of belonging in the family of God. There is one thing that does, and that is Jesus Christ, what he has accomplished for you, and the only thing that matters is your faith and your trust in him. See, one of Jesus' other followers, Peter, he put it this way. He said, once you were not a people, and he's looking at a people like us, because most of us are from the wrong bloodline, and we're from the wrong family, and we've got the wrong stuff in our past, and there's no reason that we should belong. There's no reason that we should be invited into any group. And Peter acknowledges that and says, hey, once that was true of you, you were not a people, you were alienated, you were on the outside, but now something has happened. Here's what happened. You are the people of God. He says, once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. See, what changed to make us a group who was no longer or was never a people to now being the people of God? What changed? We've received mercy. The mercy of God changed everything. And now we are chosen. We are royal. We are set apart. We are holy. Here's what I need to say to you. If you ever doubt your belonging in the family of God because you don't follow the rules, or you didn't go to the right school, or you don't look the right way, or you don't live in the right neighborhood, if you ever wake up in the morning and you have one of those moments, or at the end of the day when you lay your head down, where you just don't feel good enough, or attractive enough, or successful enough, or pure enough, or religious enough, or whatever other enough you have, here's what I want you to remember, okay? Simply put. If a foreign, pagan, prostitute was invited by God to be one of the 4 women named in the sacred lineage of his son Jesus, that means that you, whoever you are, you're invited to belong to. Let me pray. God in heaven, thank you for making us a way to belong that doesn't depend on us changing ourselves, mutilating ourselves, distorting ourselves, perfectly living by the rules, any of the things that we do to try to find belonging. God, thanks for making us a way. Thank you for Jesus. And God, I pray that you would teach us what it means that apart from anything that we are or anything that we do, we now belong to your family because of what Jesus has done, and give us the faith to cling to him. God, I know that right now there's some people who are just checking you out. They're learning about Jesus. And God, I pray that today might be the day where we stop checking Jesus out. Instead, we just surrender to him. I pray that right now the rescuing power of Jesus would fall on all of us, that you would speak our names, that you would speak a word of belonging over us, that you would claim us and you would make us a part of your family right now, Lord. That we would not stay away anymore, but that we would come in to find full belonging through Jesus. And God, then I pray that you would anchor our hearts in this truth, that our belonging is not a result of our ethnicity, our family, our reputation, our ability to follow the rules. And God, protect us from ever being a community of faith where we make the rules of belonging anything other than just accepting Jesus. Keep us from the hypocrisy of that. Father, I pray that you would make this church an impossibly, insanely diverse church where zealots and tax collectors, where Pharisees and prostitutes can come together in the belonging of Jesus, and together as imperfect people, we can move toward a whole life. We can cling to your ideals, even though we will never attain to them. And in love and grace, we can journey towards something better. But God, I pray above all that this would always be a church that knows where our belonging comes from, and we know it's not inside of us, it's something you've given us through Jesus. May we always be people who find ourselves anchored in your son Jesus, who he is, what he's done, and who he calls us to be. I pray it in his name. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for being a part of our online Pathfinder community. If this was your first time joining us, or you just want to learn more about our church, we have helpful links to resources in the description below, or you can visit our website, pathfinderstl.org. While you're at the website, you can also find our message podcasts, so you can listen to any previous messages while you are out living your life, whether you're on a run or you're running errands. And one last thing you can do before you head out is to like, share, and comment on this video. Let us know how we can help you, how we can be there for you, and just remember that no matter where you are in life, you are important to us, and we are so glad that you're part of our community. Blessings on your week.